Center Stage at UALR is pleased to bring you a conversation with playwright Sheila Callaghan. Our host, Jay Raphael, chair of the UALR Department of Theater Arts and Dance. Sheila Callaghan is a New York-based playwright who emerged from the regional alternative theater movement. Her work is sometimes described as experimental. Some of her plays include Scab, Crawl, Fade to White, Crumble, Lay Me Down Justin Timberlake, Dead City, and We Are Not in These Hands. In October 2008, Ms. Callaghan was featured on the cover of American Theater magazine, which described her as a playwright with one finger on the fast-forward button and a writer who straddles the literary theater world and the avant-garde world. Playwright Sheila Callaghan.
Good afternoon. Despite the apparent technology, this is really not that formal a session. We are grateful, pleased, happy, anxious, appreciative to have with us this afternoon Sheila Callaghan, who is a published, produced, recognized playwright who has come to help us with this evening's performance of the Fringe Festival to make herself available to you in terms of response and feedback. And I'm going to start with some things really not as Lipton-esque as this would seem, to just get us started. There's a very good chance that you haven't a clue who Sheila Callaghan is, that I could hold up as many scripts as you like and most of you would say, I never read any. This is good, not bad, but it's also indicative of a larger community of people operating in contemporary theater in venues other than the ones that you read about every day, whose work is not just born yesterday and is developmental, and who in fact comes out of a background not dissimilar to yours. So the opportunity to introduce you to her and for you to have the opportunity to introduce yourself to her through your questions and through your work tonight makes this very valid and very exciting for all of us. I can go through many things which indicate that this isn't her first venture. And a winner of the Princess Grace Award, the Jerome Fellowship from the Playwright Center in Minneapolis, a MacDowell Residency, the Susan Smith Blackburn Award, a Whitney Award. There are plenty of people willing to keep her working. Her plays have been developed and produced at places like Soho Rep, Playwrights Horizons, South Coast Rep, Actors Theater of Louisville, New George's, the Clubbed Thumb, the June Catalyst, the Woolly Mammoth, theaters in Washington. She's been produced in Europe and in Germany and the Netherlands. This is a woman with a career, and interestingly enough, that career is in many ways probably on the cusp of exploding. And hopefully what that will do for her is give her more of the same venues rather than push her into a place that her writing doesn't want to go. And I think that's what's very interesting about the nature of who produces her and who recognizes her ability. To quote some people, ta-da, she writes the plays you want to crack open. She has an amazingly fertile imagination that's on the cutting edge of culture. She is insanely brilliant. Her plays push and prod and aren't always pretty, but at the core of her work is an authenticity and emotional density that serve as reminders of what theater is and where it takes us.
Oh, Mom.
Can't help it. But the best one of all is I called an actress who I know in Washington, who has spent the last 25 years of her life in 99-seat theaters, basically doing nothing more than the work of new playwrights, who American theater once identified as a natural resource in this country that no one knew about. And I asked her to give me her opinion of Sheila, and her succinct and immediate and best answer was, she's hot. And that's what it is. Good. So I want to ask you some stuff that you can share with us and that'll perhaps stimulate some of our questions for you. Because you do so much work that is developmental and new, what characterizes the best kind of collaboration for you?
Well, the best collaborations that I've had are with people who I've known for years, who I trust implicitly, who basically I build the work for. And I have a couple of plays that recently, I have the luxury of being able to do this more and more because I've been around long enough that I can work with people who I like and people are interested in moving forward with that work. But I mean, I'm doing a play right now at Rattlestick. It's coming out at Rattlestick Theater, is a small off-Broadway theater in New York, and they're doing a play of mine in February. And the director I'm working with and some of the actors I'm working with, I've had a relationship for 10 years with. And the director I met working in Seattle, he was a co-artistic director of a very small theater there. It was one of the first professional theater experiences I've had. And so we have a shorthand with us. I wrote the play for him. He understands my rhythms. I don't really have to explain what I'm talking about or going after with the work because he understands it on a molecular level. And so there's a lot of the work is already kind of done based on who we are with each other in a room. And so that's super satisfying. I don't have as much comfort working with people who I don't know. And so, you know, sometimes larger theaters request that you work with somebody who's got a certain profile, and while you can't always get around that, I would much prefer not to do that, not to work with a stranger, even if they're insanely brilliant, because there's so much catch-up work to do.
Do the people you work with serve some kind of dramaturgical function for you?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I'm writing a play for somebody, I'm hoping that they're going to bring an outside eye to it to help me figure out what the play is going for that I can't always see, because you know I'm working so much on an instinctual level that I don't always know what I'm putting out there. I need some help kind of whittling through some of the stuff that's garbage, which like 80% of what I put on the page to start is garbage, and then most of writing. I know maybe you've heard this before, but most of writing plays is rewriting. And I feel like that's incredibly true for me, not for everybody, but I mean, Edward Albee doesn't rewrite at all. He just sits down and he has a play fully formed in his head and puts it down, and then in rehearsal room doesn't make a change at all. In fact, he gets really abrasive if you ask him what something means. It's like, it means what it says. Like, okay, Edward.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you find, though, that even though you're working with people who understand your vocabulary, working with different people, are there changes from play to play in terms of your process, or have they come to know that you have a comfortable process and they work within it?
I feel like it depends on the personality of the person. I mean, some people I work with, they like to work on the fly in the rehearsal room with feedback from the actors. Some directors I work with, we sit there, we listen to people talk, we don't say anything, and then we go back to a diner or bar and just basically share notes with each other and then work from that point. So, I mean, it really depends. I mean, some people like a lot of generative energy in the room and a lot of discussion and a lot of people flying around with ideas, even if those ideas aren't necessarily going to make it into the script, like actors feeling comfortable putting stuff forward. And some people prefer to make the process really private and mysterious so that a lot of the strings are not revealed for the actors so they can come at it with some freshness. So either way works for me.
I heard Eric Overmyer say once about a phrase that an actress asked him to change, that it had taken him 7 years to get to the contraction. He would appreciate if she didn't remove it. Do you ever find that there are things, though, that you're certain of, that you communicate to a director ahead of time, or things you feel you'd like to see as written?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, well, there are two things about that. One, I'm really, really particular about punctuation, because I feel like some of the things that, some of the way my language works, it works rhythmically, and so I don't know how many musicians are here, but I almost write it out like a score, and so different punctuations mean different things, and places where people cut people off, so that when you're listening to it, it has a little bit of a flow to it and a little bit of musicality, and so actors and directors, I make it pretty clear that should be honored on some level, because I'm really working at to the note, to the article. So that's something that I'm pretty anal about. But I had another answer and I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah. Well, yeah. Another way of approaching that question is I don't always know what I'm trying to say, but I do know tonally what I'm trying to approach. And so I can lay out goals that I have and ask that the people I'm collaborating with help me find those goals. But I don't ever come into a process without a couple of goals, at least, depending on the project. And so the director and my collaborator's job is basically to help me find those goals, rather than starting from complete chaos. So.
Okay. Any one thing that you don't want from a director?
No, but all the directors I tend to work with over and over again have this one specific quality. They're very nurturing, because I'm very neurotic and uncomfortable and spastic. And I like there being like a mommy in the room. I know that sounds really weird, but I mean, my energy in a room isn't always positive because I get very anxious, and that maybe sends some more negativity out than I actually mean to send out. I'm not unhappy, but I do a lot of this, and I can't even contain it. There's something very physical about me being in the room working on a piece, and so it really helps to have somebody in the room who's kind of lubricating the process and letting everybody know it's okay, that's a crazy playwright, don't pay any attention to her, it's not what you're doing, it's just what her process is. And I just, little babying, it sounds kind of whinery, but I just, not in the Napa Valley sense.
Do you ever actually still write in longhand?
No. My hand does this after 20 seconds. I've got a claw hand, so I can't, who can write like that? So.
Okay. So when you go into rehearsal, your expectation is that you'll rewrite, your desire is to rewrite?
My desire is to finish it the second it comes out of me. My realization at my inadequacy at being able to do that is where the rewriting comes from. When you finish a first draft of something and you're like, I can't believe I did it, it's perfect. And then the despair sets in once you hear it out loud and you're like, it's a mess, it's all wrong. I have to keep going back and going back. So that's kind of.
How often do you go back when a play closes?
Never.
Because?
Well, because part of the process of putting it up is figuring out what's working and what isn't. So when it feels done-ish, pretty much, when it's had its production. But that's why they always say, be involved with the production. Always be there, just be present for the first production, because so much of what you're writing needs to be heard in front of an audience through previews and through the closing of the play in order for you to hear what's working and what isn't. There's no way you can hear what's working and what isn't unless you have a production of it. I mean, you could have a reading and you could hear rhythms and everything, but you won't be able to, there's so much information that you learn by having an audience, by having actors kind of have ownership over the roles once there's been a production process. And so, but after that's over, I feel like that's the play. It's the play. Even if it still isn't working on all levels and firing on all cylinders, it's done. It's out in the world. It's where it should be.
And that's what you publish.
Yeah. And it might be imperfect, but it's done,
yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Early on, you may have written lots of things when you were younger and first starting to write. So the question I ask you is, why plays? Or maybe, why did you wind up in theater?
I wound up in theater because I started as an actor in high school, and I was really abysmal, like a really bad actor. But I kept getting cast in stuff because I went to a high school. You just get cast in things, and then in college I went to a school without a theater department, and so we would show up and we would be cast. And then, at some point, I realized I shouldn't be doing this because it's sad for people to pay money and see me saying lines. It's just not fair to the world. So I just, but I still loved
It's a good thing you didn't become a director.
Oh yeah, but because I'm a terrible director also. But I also came from a literary background. I wrote poetry. I wrote prose. I wrote short stories. I always knew that I wanted to do something with writing, but I don't know that I've got the personality to sit in a room all by myself for months and months and months and months and months and months and make something that's completely from myself and then just ask people to pay attention to it. I feel like something about the collaborative energy and being in a room and being with people and being social, that satisfies that part of me. It feels like I can't be a hermit for the rest of my life. So.
Do you remember the first play you wrote?
Yes.
And you don't want to talk about it?
No, I mean, I could tell you about it if you want.
I do.
It's really silly. It's really, really silly. It was called Ring Around the Rosie. And it was a one-act set in a mental institution where all of these wacky people would just go crazy, but then you realize that they have this like really heartfelt tale at the deeply embedded within their psychosis. And of course, the doctor at the end turns out to be a patient.
Sounds just like this one.
So, you know, a deeply derivative piece of garbage, but it was my first play.
Yeah.
You know, you have to start somewhere. Explain what you mean by derivative. Oh, well, like, you know, I was dealing with tropes that I didn't actually know were tropes. You know, like the doctor who's secretly the patient, and the sex addict who, you know, was had a mortifying personal episode with her husband, and that's what turned her into this beast. And like, you know, just like the things that I was replicating from things I had seen over and over again that I was just embedding into my play. And it was, you know, a mental institution play, group therapy. It was a group therapy session. That's a great place to try out all of the kind of characters that you have been trying to make your own, you know, because they have to have a revelation. That's why they're in that setting, you know. And then they have to resist it at first because they don't want to be there, you know. And so, I don't know. So I just basically picked from the kind of characters I like to watch, and I made them my own-ish.
What was the first play of yours that was produced?
That one, in college.
And professionally?
It was a short one-act called New Shoes. And I think that they published it by Play Scripts. And that was about a Vietnam vet who was having these delusions about a woman who worked for him in his office. And so I don't know where that came from. It's not like I haven't experienced being a Vietnam vet. None that I remember anyway. I mean, was he?
Okay. How did 13P evolve?
Well, that was, I don't know if you guys have heard of the development cycle, but a lot of new plays used to anyway. I don't know if it's still the same problem, but all these playwrights, I mean, there's this huge amount of playwrights that have been kicked out of the playwriting schools. All these playwriting programs have risen up in the past 20 years, and so you've got this glut of playwrights who, with this enormous wealth of material, and they didn't know really what they wanted it, of course, to be produced. And so all these theaters around the country would have these festivals where they would introduce plays to their community via readings. And so all these reading series would happen around the country, and people with their plays would go from reading series to reading series to reading series with their plays, and of course they would tailor each time the work for the reading series. And but the plays would never be produced because the theaters didn't have any intentions of doing the plays. What they would do is they would have a new play festival where they get all this money, and they would use a portion of the money for the new play festival, and the rest of the money would go to their season. And so basically, it was an effort to support writers without actually wanting to produce their work. And a bunch of playwrights, 13 of them, got really frustrated with this without getting their plays produced, basically killing the plays in a developmental process. And so we decided we would produce our own plays. And that's kind of where it started. So there's 13 of us. We work on an implosion model where each one of the 13 will get our play produced. And at the end of the 13th play, the group is disbanded. And we dissolve into the ether.
Where are you? How far along?
I just finished my play, and I'm number 7. So right at that midway mark.
And you've been able to draw production support to yourselves on the basis of who these people are, what they're writing.
Yeah, well, the first show was a huge success, and it was Anne Washburn, and she was just starting to get a name for herself. So there was that. Then we have another playwright, young Jean Lee, who deals with gender politics in this really deconstructive way, which nobody's doing. And she got a lot of attention, but I think probably the single most money-drawing person we have in our group is Sarah Rule, because she's just a little famous right now. And so she's, as far as new playwrights go. And so we've been able to get a lot of support through our connection with her. So.
Do you think that this model has a life after its immediate goal, though, in terms of what you're accomplishing?
I don't know. I mean, there's other playwrights around the country are forming groups, and so there's sort of a repercussive energy about it. But I'm not sure that we're interested in that. I mean, the plays that we're doing are plays that other people wouldn't do. I mean, the play that I just put up was a play that nobody would do. People would read it and be like, this doesn't work. And it just didn't read well because it was a super visual play, and it's also, you know, it doesn't have a lot of really strong, it's not about the relationships in the play, and you know, people are always wanting the relationships to come forward. It's not about the relationships, it was about the atmosphere, and so that's impossible to read on a page. And so the kind of work we're reserving for our 13-piece slots are more intangible kind of plays that don't sort of capture larger imaginations of theaters for whatever reason. So
this relates a little bit to that. It's a little bit farther away, but it was interesting in looking back at some of the critical responses to your work and the most recent work in New York, which you weren't around for. And I don't necessarily subscribe to knowing what the critical values are of these people who are saying it, but a little bit of a pattern emerges every once in a while, which is that they like you better than what they see realized. That I find that really interesting, that as different and strange and interestingly redirected as your writing may be, they buy it in the writing even as they see it and can't discriminate or can't integrate that feeling with the way in which it was realized on stage. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Well, you know, what I get a lot from other peers also is like, I love the play, I hate the production. And I also get from the same productions, I love the production. And so what I'm finding is that it's just, the work is asking for very strong choices. And so either you're on board for those choices or you're not. And so I never really get a lukewarm response from the direction. I always get people like, I hate that, I hate what they did with that, or like, oh my God, I love, for the same thing. Like, for example, with this one play, and if you're looking at any of the press for this play, you'll find that the ending is super controversial. The ending in this play is a woman holding a lamp bursts into flames. She crushes the lamp against her body. She gets on fire, bursts into flames, but doesn't burn, and basically walks out of the house on fire without burning. And so, like, the most impossible stage direction, and we're building this play on a budget of $20,000, $10,000 which is going to the stage rental, and the rest is going to me. I'm just kidding. It's going to, I wish, just incidental costs that it takes to rig a space that wasn't a theater, and so we really had no money. And so what my director chose to do is he chose to be so meta-theatrical about it that the house lights went on in this moment, and a stagehand came out basically with a binder and read the stage direction off. And while he did that, the woman who was supposed to burst into flames, she handed the lamp to a stagehand. The stagehand walked off with it, and she just basically peeled her hoodie off and stood there in a camisole and walked off stage like this. And like, you found that people either hated that decision or thought it was the most brilliant thing. And major publications, like the Times, hated it. It was really upset about it, gave away the whole ending, said it was totally unpoetic. And then the New York Magazine, they have this thing called the approval matrix. And we got points for being highbrow and successful for the impossible to stage ending that somehow we pulled off. And so that's what the kind of decision that I guess you're being forced to make. Do you like this or do you hate it? It's never really how do you feel about it. Yeah. It's like, I hate it or I like it, which I think is good, I think. I don't know.
It's not keeping you from having fans. Yeah. So it says in your bio that you are currently or periodically do or whatever teaching playwriting. How do you do that?
Magic. I don't know. No, I'm very stressed out and I get no sleep and I cry a lot. I don't know.
And they write it down?
Yes. Well, right now, I mean, I just had a baby, so it's a little harder, but what I was doing was I was traveling a lot for my teaching gigs. I would be a visiting artist because it's really hard to get work in New York for teaching if you're not famous, super famous, or you're not connected to a university. And I didn't go to school in New York, so I'm not connected anywhere, and I'm not super famous. I mean, we're talking about like Chuck Me, Edward Albee, this level of Teresa Rebeck. And so I would do visiting teaching residencies around the country. Can't do that so much anymore. So now I do things like low residency programs where I only have to be out of town for 10 days. Or I'm teaching at Columbia University now, and I'm basically just mentoring students where we'll go will just go to a cafe and talk about their plays. And so I don't really have to be in the classroom 2-3 days a week.
When you are, the question still surfaces. I mean, from your point of view, how are you teaching playwriting? I mean, what is it that they need to get from you, or that structures a class of writers?
I try not to be like a critique session, you know, because if we're talking about playwriting programs, I mean, these are people trying to find their voices. They don't really, I mean, it should be, I feel like they should be open to feeling comfortable about experimenting. I feel like the environment should be mostly nurturing with some well-chosen critiques, or thoughtfully articulated critiquing, so that you're not squashing somebody for something that they might be doing that isn't necessarily, you know, doesn't work yet. It might someday work, or, you know, so what I try to do is I present a lot of different kinds of work. I teach contemporary plays almost exclusively because I feel like they can get other plays anywhere else, you know. They could learn Shakespeare on their own, or they could learn it through a literature class. I mean, I'm not going to teach Shakespeare, even though there's a lot to be valued there. I'm just not going to do that. And then when we go around and discuss the play, I always ask them what their goals are for the piece, and I try to help them reach the goals. Even if they don't know what their goals are, they're gonna talk about the kind of play they want to write, and I'm not going to tell them the kind of play they should be writing, because that's not really. How can you ever find your voice if you have somebody telling you what you should be doing, you know? So.
What was the best part of your education on the graduate level, where you took an MFA in playwriting?
Living in LA. The education was sort of, you know, it's not a great school for playwriting. You go there because you want to be in Los Angeles, and I feel like that was a huge education. Has anybody here ever been to LA? It's an education just showing up, isn't it? It's like, first of all, it lives up to all your expectations, and then it lives up to none of them at the same time. It's a crazy city. And I thought I wanted to do film and TV, and I still do, but that like made it much more of a reality. So it made me run screaming to New York anyway. So, but yeah, I don't know. Graduate programs are tricky. I don't know that they help everybody. I don't know that they help me, but which is strange because I'm teaching in one, so it's.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, I think it's impossible to teach playwriting, which is why I try not to teach playwriting. I try to expose people to work, and then I try to help them write the play that they want to write. So I don't know that I'm teaching anything.
Do you suggest there are playwrights they should read?
Mm-hmm, yeah, for sure. I always pick playwrights that are adventurous with language and form, because one of the big awakening experiences for me was that there's more than 2 types of plays. And you wouldn't know that by looking at the main stages in a lot of the Lord theaters, you know? And so just to know that even if it's flawed, there's so many different models that you can choose from. And so that for me is really important, to expose people to as much variance as possible in theater. But also, yes, that's the answer.
Okay, good. I'm always interested in the habits of writers. You know, Roald Dahl wrote in the middle of the night in the dark.
I drink a lot.
You drink?
Oh, you mean like writing habits?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
you know,
just kidding.
Not you know, rice pudding. Although I know rice pudding plays a large part.
Yeah.
He wrote in the middle of the night in the dark. Late in his life, Malamud wrote about writers writing, and, you know, obsessed about that kind of circle. What are the most productive patterns for you as a writer in terms of what allows you to work, or working privately, or times of day, or whatever?
Oh, well, I find that I actually can't have a pattern, because I get really anxious with routine, and so I have to always be flexible about times of day and places. I can't write in the same place for too long. Like, I have like 7 different cafes in my neighborhood. Thank God it's a very caffeinated neighborhood, but seven cafes in my neighborhood that I'll sort of trade off with and write in, and then sometimes I'll write at home. And then sometimes I'll write at night, and sometimes I'll write in the morning. So I don't really have, and then sometimes I'll write in 5-hour stretches, and sometimes I won't at all, right? So I'm not really like I'm disciplined in that per project I'm very focused. But as far as writing every day or I know that's like not, it's kind of counter to everything that everybody tells you in writing programs, like you must write every day, and I don't write every day. But that helps me because I need distance between my projects. So, and habits, I mean, that's it, really.
Do you journal stuff? Do you keep scraps of paper?
I used to journal. I don't really anymore. I have my iPhone and I take notes in the notepad. I thumb type with one thumb, which makes it really slow. So this is a problem because it's not efficient. But anyway.
Have any of your plays ever been born whole in a moment, in a flash, in that flame?
Like a 10-minute play, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm also. I don't trust. I don't trust the ones that come out fast. Except one. This is the one that's going up at Rattlestick. That one came out whole. That's one. I'm lying. That one came out whole. So that's a crazy play. So, but that's what I was telling you about over lunch. The one that was trying to do something and did something else. So I wrote. Okay, so there's this like sort of glut of. Okay, backing up. There's this Mel Gussow for the New York Times 3 years ago wrote this article. Maybe it was 2 years ago called "Men Behaving Badly," and it sort of. Delighted in all of these plays that were being done around the city, these really assholey 30-something guys who would treat women like shit, and they're really thinly drawn female characters. They were all hookers or wives that were getting cheated on, or like sisters with drug habits, and the men were all these romantic kind of writerly types who would muse upon how tormented they were about the way they were treating these women, and about how hard their lives were, and then they would go do something reprehensible, and then you know, all the critics were like, wow, this is the guy I want to be, and then they would write these awesome reviews of these plays, and it was really kind of disheartening. And so, but I kept showing up to see these plays along with everybody I knew, and we would all get out of the theaters and be like, oh, I hate this play, oh, I hate this writer, and then we would go and see the next thing that he did. And so I'm like, well, there must be something in it. I can't just sit here and get angry at the poorly organized, you know, thoughts about gender in them. I feel like there must be something else. So I said I was going to write a misogynist play. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a cinch. And so I sat down and I started writing, and it was terrible. It was really hard to do. Because there's something else cooking in it, you know? And so it turned into this other kind of play. So it's not a misogynist play in the end of the day, but I can't tell you about it without you reading the play. So it's sort of pointless for me to talk about it. But
that's okay. Fever Dream in Washington coming.
Yes.
Want to talk a little about that?
Sure. There was this little tiny playwright in 17th century Spain called Pedro Calderón de la Barca, and he wrote a play called Life is a Dream, a morality play. And it's about a dynasty, and this father who banishes his son into the mountains because he doesn't read a horoscope. He's told, the stars tell him that the sun will uprise one day and kill him. And so I modernized it and I set it in corporate America, and it's now a corporate dynasty. And the king who banishes his son in my play is a Rupert Murdoch-y type guy who's really ruthless. And he banishes his son to customer service in the basement, where he's literally chained to a desk. And you know, he rises up and takes power, and it's awesome.
So, last formal question I'll ask you.
I'm sorry, I'm talking so much. I feel like a motorman.
Hey, you got to earn your honorarium, you know. In October, the New York Times wrote a column on accusations of biased gender in what women face in getting their work produced. And Teresa Rebeck was quoted as saying, I personally don't think playwriting is a gene on a Y chromosome. Many of our male peers find the debate intolerable. Men in the community seem to think everything is fine. So either because it is or isn't your experience, or because you participate or don't or whatever, respond a little, talk a little about this.
Well, I felt like I responded with that play that I wrote. I was trying to respond to that, but but it's as I was telling you over lunch, it's kind of ironic because the theater that was guilty of putting up these plays is doing my play in February, And so I'm one of the only female playwrights that's getting produced off Broadway in this season. And it's because I wrote this kind of play, that's this very male-ish play. And so I don't know, I mean, yeah, I mean, like, I feel like the theaters that are producing female playwrights are producing a certain kind of play, very feminine feeling play, a play that deals with love and heart, and usually has a mother at the center of it, or a girlfriend, or some very, very recognizable yet nurturing type of female. And I feel like that's because there's only so many edgy plays that a season can do without, you know, without shooting themselves in the foot as far as subscriber base. And if a woman is going to write an edgy play, it's going to cover too much terrain, I feel like, because then you have the female play slot, and then you have the edgy play slot, and that can't happen because women can't do both. They have to write female plays, and the edgy plays belong to the territory of men, and that's where the new play heat is kind of being generated. And so I feel like women are left out of that, unfortunately, because there's so many expectations about what females are supposed to write. I don't know that I don't really write those kind of plays. I do, but I try not to also. So, I mean, I write family plays, but I'm also writing in, I'm not writing the comfortable family play, but I also write deconstructed plays. I write all sorts of crap. And so, I don't know. I don't really fit into those slots either. Except when I try to, and then it works out for me. So that kind of sucks.
If you were going to do something else besides write, what would it be?
I don't know. I don't know what I would do without writing. Maybe, well, are you assuming that I would already have talent for it? Because
no, I don't assume anything.
Because, I mean, okay, so if something that I don't have any talent for.
Something that interests you, that you would be addicted to trying, that you honor a private passion for, you don't have to have ever done it.
Private passion. I would be a pop star.
As a singer?
Yeah. I would be, but I would also be 5'8" and 105 pounds, and I would have some dancing ability. None of which, of course, are true. But so I don't know if that's like, yeah, no, that's a private passion.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm addicted to Britney Spears videos and stuff. I don't know. Thank you.
Finally, recognition. If you could travel anywhere tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I would go to South America.
Someplace in particular?
No. I don't know. I just said that because somebody I know is going. So, I don't know. Russia also. Yeah. And the moon also.
Okay. Q&A, your turn. What would you like to know? What would you like to ask about? No question is too naive.
Sure.
What style of poetry did you write, and do you also still find yourself sometimes writing poetry?
I never actually had a real style. What I was doing was emulating playwrights that I loved, because I'm not a poet, so I was sort of always finding I used to write poetry, but I would always just sort of emulate who I was reading at the time. But I was reading Anne Sexton, I was reading John Ashbery, then Heginian, I was reading a lot of language poets. I was reading a lot like Frank O'Hara. I don't really write poems anymore. I mean, sometimes I'll write love poems to my husband, but like nothing that I would ever publish or anything. So, yeah.
Some of your stuff could stand alone in that way, though. Individual, lengthier speeches or passages could stand alone in that way.
Well, some of the earlier stuff, I feel like I was reading a lot of languagey playwrights like Eric Ann, Ruth Margraf. I don't know, probably people that, you know, they're very fringy, so I don't know that anybody would have heard of them, but Mac Wellman. I don't mean fringy in the sense of fringe playwriting, I mean in the fringes of theater. But they were really focused on language as as a primary. They didn't focus on character. They didn't focus on character arcs or psychology. They focused on how the word would come alive in a room. And so these earlier plays are the ones that I feel like were more aggressively poetic, if you can say that.
Yes.
When you're speaking about these goals that you try to help your students find and the goals that you make
Well, people often don't know that they have goals until they start talking about the play. I mean, let me think. I mean, I guess I would have to reference something specific, but okay. So this one student I recently was working with, she was writing this drama about her bouncing between two boys. One was her old boyfriend who they had a codependent relationship with each other, and then the other one was this new boy who was totally in love with her. He was older. She was 18, he was 25, and so he's the older man. And I asked her what the play she wanted to write was, and she told me it was about a girl who was scared to leave her home and go to college because she was going to miss her mom. And like, it was so strange because the play didn't really say any of that. But after she said that, it made so much sense because the girl was sort of inactive. She was just basically going from boyfriend to boyfriend. She was a mess, and she was always complaining about her life. And in the end, the final images of the girl resting her head on her mother's shoulder and crying. And so what we discovered was that she needed to build in a couple of more places where she would actually reference her feelings about her mother, whether honest or completely buried, so that it would be clear that the reason why she was flailing wasn't because she was, a manipulative, juvenile girl. She was simply wrecked about being alone in the world. And so we needed to see that through the relationship with her mother. And so that's kind of what I mean, talking to the person about what the kind of play they want to write versus what I'm reading on the page.
So is that usually where you start your process, or do you start your process with just, you think of a character you'd like to write a play about, or like you said, your people who you work with as an inspiration?
Yeah, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
That's where you start with.
Yeah. Yeah, like that play that I just told you about, yeah, that was like the psychic runoff of being in too many plays about jaundiced strippers, and not being in them. I meant strippers with hepatitis, not jaundice. My scurvy. That's what they had. These strippers with scurvy. But no, so that was that. But like, if I'm working with an ensemble and they bring material to me, I'll shape that material. And so it just really depends on the work itself. Or like for the Kate Crackernuts, I mean, this is an adaptation of a very short British fairy tale with a female heroine at the center. So, it depends on the project. Depends on the designer. If they're good, it feels joyous and triumphant. If they're bad, I would rather be stabbing myself with hot needles.
What constitutes bad?
Missed vision? Like, hopefully I embed enough markers in the script that that people will see what I'm going for, and they'll at least understand the vocabulary of the world, so that they'll build something that feels appropriate to the tone of the play, or to it'll at least match some of the markers that I've set. And I'm pretty conscientious about setting enough without, trying to control the process. But sometimes you'll get somebody who's got his own agenda or her own agenda coming to the work, and they want to use this as a platform to explore ideas that they had since grad school. And that's sort of hard. That doesn't happen very often with me, though, because I kind of know the people I want to be working with at this point. But it happened a lot earlier, and it was a bummer. Really, really hard to watch. Yeah.
I was looking on your website, and it said that you wrote some musicals, too, like The Elementals or something.
Yeah.
Do you write music for those, or do you?
No, I don't. My husband, he's a composer, and so he wrote the music to that one.
Okay.
I don't write music. I sing. I sing a little bit, but we used to have a band, too, but I don't play an instrument or anything, so.
With the Justin Timberlake thing?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? That looks like fun.
The Crumble, Lay Me Down, Justin Timberlake. Yeah, that, so this little, there's two entries. This little theater downtown called Manhattan Theater Source, they were doing this Christmas festival, and they wanted us to write racy Christmas plays so they could call it Triple Xmas. They were so excited about the title. They had the title before they had the plays. Triple Xmas, wild and crazy plays. And the plays that me and 2 other playwrights read, and the plays were not racy at all. Because nobody wants to write a X-rated Christmas play. It's like instant death. I mean, you know, that play will never get produced anywhere ever again. Basically, I was writing a Christmas play. And then, and I was living in a really, really crappy apartment at the time. And there's a character in the play that's an actual apartment. It says, that's what the title Crumble is. He's an apartment who's in disrepair. He's a brownstone. And so I had an apartment where the radiator would bang, and one time I put up shelves over my bed, and they crashed. Like, thank God I wasn't sleeping, but I came home to find plaster everywhere in my apartment. And so the apartment took on, and then, you know, New York apartments, I mean, people in their New York apartments, I mean, there's no words. You have such a dramatic relationship with the place you live in up in New York because there's no space, and anyway, landlords are notoriously awful at upkeep. And so I had that kind of relationship with my apartment, and it felt like a person in my life, a really abusive boyfriend who I couldn't break up with because he would feed me. So that's where that character came from. Yeah.
If you could produce any one of your plays, which would you produce and why?
Oh, I did that. Assuming that I hadn't I would have picked the play that I just did, because nobody else would produce it. That's why. Because and I saw why. I mean, I don't know that it works, fires on all cylinders. I don't know that the play is a totally successful project. I mean, I still like it a lot, and I'm really glad I did it, but I don't know that I would have ever figured it out had I not done it. So that's the whole mission of 13P, so I'm really happy I did it. But yeah, definitely that one.
And what was the name of that?
That one's called Crawl Fade to White. It's probably my most sheerly poetic play. It's hard to sustain that for an hour and a half.
Something political is going on. Where do you get your material?
The internet? I don't know. I do a lot of research on the internet, so that's true, actually. That's not just a joke. But and I'm on the internet a tremendous amount of my life, like way too unhealthy. But like, why do I write? Is that what you're asking? Like, or
What moves you to write?
I guess it depends on the moment. I don't know. You know what? I do little assignments for myself. Like I'll give myself okay. So cake I can tell you anecdotally, I wrote Cake Cracker Nuts because I was trying to get I wanted to get this this writer residency in Minneapolis, and I looked at all the plays that they had done before. This sounds really kind of non-artistic, but I looked at all the plays they'd done before, and they all had this same thing in common. They were very linguistically adventurous, and so I made it my goal to write a linguistically adventurous play with a strong female heroine. I read this newspaper article recently about this guy, Stephen Kurtz, who was part of the Critical Art Ensemble, who got arrested for biological terrorism because he was replicating an experiment in his living room. He's an artist, and he was doing this to protest against all the money that's wasted on some government experiments, and he was replicating one in his house for much cheaper. And he was out of town. His wife had a heart attack and died in their house, and they came in and found all these experiments when they came to remove the body, and so men in hazmat suits came in and basically wrecked his house and wouldn't let him near it, not even to, he was just not allowed back in the house, and they put him in jail for a while, and that moved me, and so I was writing about that. So that was a newspaper article. I guess it just depends on, I'm not like, I can't give you an answer like freedom of speech, because
No, I'm just saying in terms of what your stories are. Do they stem from personal things? Do you get your motivation from personal experiences?
I guess. I mean, I guess I guess everybody says this, but every character in my play is me on some level. Like, I'm an old dusty apartment who's in desperate need of a repair and is trying to kill its inhabitants. Or like, I'm a stripper Jello wrestler who snorts coke off my girlfriend's ass. I mean, or like, that is a character in my play. I'm sorry. Or like I'm a headless sheep, who's desperately running around looking for his head. I mean, I've got a pretty a pretty enlarged sense of myself, I guess.
5'8" wouldn't even be big enough.
Yeah, I know. No, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of like, I've got a lot of energy and a big imagination. That might be it.
I've read a couple plays in my day. Would you say that you were more of a character-driven writer, where your characters drive the play, or a storyline? You want to hit that storyline, that no matter what,
the plot.
no matter who the characters are, gotta get to that.
No, I think I'm much more of a character-based writer. I try to write plot sometimes, and I'm really terrible at it. I'm really bad at it. In fact, I tried to write a procedural because you have to write spec scripts when you're trying to write for TV, and it's like CSI or something, and I was just abysmal. Like anything where plot's involved, I just have no facility for that at all. Yeah, so.
Going back to like this visions and stuff, has anybody like has done your plays? You're trying to get something across, but they either like totally mistook it or thought of something that you didn't think of that was either like good or bad or whatever?
Yeah, both. That's why I think it's so exciting as a collaborative art, because people are going to ruin it, but people are also going to make it better than you can ever imagine. And it's like almost like a gamble. But it's less of a gamble, I think, the more you work, because you just know more people who are aesthetically aligned with you. But yes, to answer your question, yes. I have had really bad experiences with people missing the boat. And generally, that's why I try to be involved from the beginning. But even if you're involved from the beginning and you're trying to work a really healthy collaboration, sometimes you're just not. It's a bad marriage, and you can't do anything about that. You just have to get out unscathed, and. I mean, I can't like take my name off the project, and you can't disinvite press. So I mean, you could, but that would be really sad for the actors. And so I don't know. You just kind of duck.
Following up on that, how hard do you step in? Let's say it's someone you collaborate with that you like, that you work well with, and they're missing the boat. I mean, how firm are you? How much will you step in even up until the bitter end?
It's never happened, actually. Somebody who I'm really good with collaborating, and somebody who I trust, there's never missing the boat there, because part of what's built into that is a flexible conversation. So they're never going to miss their boat. We're going to talk about things, and if he wants to or she wants to go in a direction with it that I'm not completely comfortable, I will explain that I'm not completely comfortable, and then we'll find a place in the middle that actually works for both of us. So it would never get to the point where it's a train wreck. But when it has gotten to a train wreck, there is absolutely no salvaging that. There's no conversation you can have when it's going so wrong. It's just going to be a bad time, and the best you can do is just hope that the press is kind. Which I've never actually had them be kind to a train wreck, because I think it's obvious. It's always obvious when the collaboration is going foul. It's not as obvious when it's going really well. For example, this last play that I did, the Times was not into what we did. But I love the play. I love what we did with it. And so I still consider that a success. And all the rest of the press was great for it. But I'm saying a lot of stuff about press, and I don't think press is, I think it's only important to the health of the production and not to the health of the play. So anyway.
Tyler?
A glimpse at all, really, into new plays, just what we can get our hands on as far as scripts are concerned. So do you see that more theaters are becoming more willing to produce brand new works?
Well, yes and no, I guess. I mean, you hear people wanting and looking for new work, but I don't know at what level you mean, because there's two kinds of, this is being totally general, but there's two kinds of theaters in the world. There's the theaters that are smaller, and there's more than two kinds of theaters in the world. But when we're talking about having new plays exist in communities, you have the plays that come out of the communities, and people who are working with smaller theaters who are actually open to that. And then you have the subscription audiences who are there's an unwritten contract between the audience and the theater, and so you cannot really, it's hard to thwart, it's hard to bring new kinds of work to them. So you can have a new play come out, but as long as it reaffirms what the theater is already built into the aesthetics of its season, then you're not going to have too much variance in the kind of work getting done. So yes, new plays getting done elsewhere, yes, people are looking for them, but it has to always adhere to I guess the constraints that the theater has already built up with its audience. And I'm not saying that audiences are limited, I'm saying that artistic directors are often unwilling to take on risky material. And almost all new plays are risky because you don't have, there's no, I mean, unless you have something vetted like Sarah Rule. I mean, Sarah Rule gets done because she's been christened. She's a good new playwright to have around because everybody says she is. And she's also very talented, so that kind of works. But that's no longer a risk, you know, even though it's a new play. So long answer to a short question. I think, yes, theaters are open to new plays if the new plays aren't so terrifyingly new.
Untested.
Yes, untested, unvetted.
When you're writing, are you able to see the parts that serve and do not serve the story during the writing process? Or do you find that you have to get further into the staging process until you see what doesn't serve the story?
These are good questions. This is good conversation.
Are you able to, while you're writing, realize what is only self-amusing to you?
And does it matter?
I think you never know how things are working until you have an audience. And then it's whether I'm always willing to change things for the sake of clarity, but some people aren't. So for me, when I find out that something is not coming across, but something that I want in the play, I will probably change it, just so that I can make it more clear. That answers your question. I do a lot of rewriting on its feet.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of playwrights who are adamantly adherent to their initial impulses, and I'm not as trustful as my initial impulses.
So a lot of the rewriting process comes from seeing the physicalization.
Yes, and from feedback. I'm a big talker, or I'm a big listener anyway in a room. Well, clearly I'm a big talker. But when it comes to my plays, I really love to hear what people are talking. And I'm not saying I'll change something because you want me to, but if 4 people have a very strong opinion about one thing, even if the opinions are not the same, they're clearly all pointing to one thing that is clicking with people either positively or negatively, and so it's worth for me to pay attention to it and whether or not I want the negative along with the positive. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Characters wearing a particular item when they're going through their play, like, oh, it's got to have that.
Yes. They all wear bow ties. Every character I've ever written. Sorry, no, I'm just kidding. No, but yes, I always make sure that if there's a really particular item that I need on a character for whatever reason, then I'll write it into the script. And I'll write it into the script so much that if there's ever a saucy director who wants to cut it out, I'll write it into the text, and then they can't touch it. And that's like a little trick for all the playwrights in the room. It's sort of almost illegal to change, in this country anyway, not in other countries, to change a line of dialogue without the writer's permission. And so if you write, she wears a sombrero in the stage direction, a director could maybe cut that. If you write a character who says, I love your sombrero, then they have to have a sombrero on stage because it would make no sense otherwise. So I'll do that sometimes. But I'm not like I'm not like tyrannical about costumes, but I do like, costumes so often indicate character, and so if I have a character who's wearing Mickey Mouse ears around the house for 4 weeks straight, and that says something about him, then I'll write that in there. But yeah, sometimes, I guess.
Well, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for spending this time with us and for sharing your thoughts and your talent.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again this evening. I'm sure you look forward to seeing us.
I do. It's
And
awesome.
I thank you all for coming, and I appreciate your input.